In a world that constantly preaches kindness, compassion, and doing the right thing, what happens to those who take that message to heart? Why do the most sincere, well-meaning individuals so often end up crushed, forgotten, or exploited? Today, we're diving deep into a dark truth no one wants to admit: the danger of being a good person. Not because goodness is wrong, but because the world is not built to reward it. This is a warning, a mirror held up to society. If you've ever wondered why the world seems to walk over those with the best intentions, stay with us till the end. What you'll hear might forever change the way you view morality, justice, and your place in this system. Goodness, in its most sincere form, is rarely rewarded in a world shaped by hierarchies of power, deception, and calculated self-interest. The ideal of being a good person has been so thoroughly romanticized that people forget its dangerous consequences when placed within a structure that is neither just nor moral. A good person without power becomes a convenient pawn, not a celebrated hero. In truth, society is not built to protect them. It is designed to consume them. The goodness of a powerless man is rarely viewed as noble. Instead, it is seen as weakness, naivety, or even incompetence. Power structures, whether political, corporate, or social, are not moved by moral virtue. They are motivated by utility, fear, and control. And in such systems, the powerless good man becomes a tool in someone else's machinery. The tragedy of goodness lies in its invisibility to systems that prioritize dominance. A man who chooses fairness over manipulation or compassion over conquest is not simply ignored, he is targeted. He becomes the obstacle to ambition, the inconvenience to aggression, and the burden to efficiency. He is ridiculed for being too soft, too forgiving, too hesitant to act, when ruthlessness is rewarded. His reluctance to fight back becomes the very reason he's chosen as the target. In schools, in workplaces, in politics, the good person often ends up the scapegoat, the sacrificial figure whose pain is easier to ignore because he refuses to retaliate. There is a subtle tyranny in how society manipulates the image of goodness. From childhood, we are told to be kind, to share, to be humble, to turn the other cheek. These values are instilled with such fervor that we equate suffering with virtue. But in adulthood, the game changes. The world no longer rewards the humble. It elevates the loudest voice. It doesn't cherish the honest. It honors the most persuasive. And it rarely uplifts the good. It uplifts the useful. The good man, believing in the promise of morality, discovers that his virtues have become his shackles. He keeps quiet when exploited, believing patience will be seen. He forgives betrayal, thinking it will be remembered. He sacrifices his own needs, expecting recognition. But the world keeps moving, cold and indifferent. Not because it hates him, but because it does not even see him. This is not to say goodness is inherently flawed. The real flaw is in the assumption that goodness alone is enough. In a world where institutions are maintained by those who are willing to compromise, lie, manipulate, and dominate, the person who lives by conscience alone walks unarmed into a battlefield. He does not understand the game being played. His morality becomes a language no one else speaks. And so, while he holds firm in principle, others reshape reality around him. His silence is taken as submission. His compassion is taken as permission. His forgiveness becomes an invitation to repeat the offense. The powerless good person becomes the cushion others fall on, the one who absorbs the weight of injustice without complaint. It is not because he is weak, but because he assumes the world will acknowledge his strength. But power respects only resistance, and when it finds none, it takes everything. Being good without being strategic is not noble, it is dangerous. It places the individual in the path of exploitation with no defense. The world does not give medals to the righteous unless their righteousness also serves a purpose. Otherwise, it forgets them. Or worse, it uses them. The danger of being a good person is not in the goodness itself, but in the blindness that often accompanies it. blindness to how systems operate, blindness to how others think, blindness to the fact that not everyone is motivated by fairness or honesty. The belief that goodness will naturally prevail is a myth told to keep the well-intentioned pacified. And in believing it, many are led quietly to their ruin, convinced they are doing the right thing, while the world quietly moves on without them. In the realm of power and politics, goodness is often a liability rather than an asset. The structures that govern society are crafted not by idealists, but by pragmatists who understand the raw mechanics of influence and control. These systems thrive on the manipulation of truth, the bending of principles, and the strategic sacrifice of morality for gain. A good person who enters such an environment, armed only with sincerity and honesty, is ill prepared for the cold realities they will face. The very rules that dictate success within these frameworks reward cunning and ruthlessness far more than virtue and integrity. To expect otherwise is to misunderstand the nature of the world itself. The powerful do not seek allies in goodness, they seek tools and instruments that can be wielded to further their ambitions. They view the good as naive or, at best, inconvenient. Goodness, in this context, is equated with predictability. A person who will adhere to rules, even when breaking them would be beneficial. This predictability makes the good person easy to manipulate, as they are more likely to trust others and less likely to engage in deception themselves. While they may believe in the ideal of mutual respect and fairness, the harsh reality is that those who dominate do so precisely because they abandon such ideals. The good person's adherence to morality leaves them exposed to exploitation, as the world seldom rewards those who hold steadfast to principles at the expense of practicality. Furthermore, the very act of being good in a corrupt environment becomes a form of rebellion, one that rarely succeeds. The good person challenges the accepted norms simply by refusing to participate in the games of deceit and power grabs. Yet, this challenge is often met with hostility rather than admiration. Rather than inspiring change, the good person is marginalized, dismissed as impractical, or portrayed as an obstacle to progress. Their presence is inconvenient because it reminds others of a standard they are unwilling to meet. This leads to a form of social punishment, where the good person is isolated or undermined, as if their very morality threatens the fabric of the existing order. The paradox is that goodness, when stripped of power and strategy, can become a tool for oppression. Those who govern the world exploit the goodwill of the virtuous to maintain their own dominance. The good person's willingness to forgive, to overlook offenses, and to sacrifice personal interests for the greater good is often exploited as a weakness. Their silence in the face of injustice is interpreted as consent. Their trust is taken as a guarantee of loyalty, making them vulnerable to betrayal. The cycle of exploitation feeds on the assumption that goodness will be met with reciprocity. But history shows that such assumptions are dangerously misplaced. In essence, the good person who refuses to adapt to the realities of power inadvertently contributes to their own subjugation. By clinging to idealism without a strategic understanding of the environment, they become passive participants in a game rigged against them. The world's indifference to their virtue is not a failure of justice, but a reflection of the underlying mechanics of power. It is a system designed to reward those who know when to compromise, when to conceal their true intentions, and when to act decisively, even if that means abandoning moral principles. The good person's failure to recognize this results in a tragic vulnerability that few are prepared to face. This understanding does not call for the abandonment of goodness altogether, but warns against its naive application. To survive and influence within a flawed system, goodness must be paired with wisdom and strategic acumen. The truly effective individual learns to navigate the complexities of power without losing their core values. They understand when to wield kindness and when to deploy firmness, when to trust and when to withhold trust. when to speak, and when to remain silent. This balance is delicate and often uncomfortable, but it is necessary for maintaining both moral integrity and practical influence. The danger, therefore, is not in being good but in being blindly good. Goodness without awareness is not strength, it is vulnerability. It is a perilous path that leads not to triumph but to defeat, not to respect but to exploitation. In a world shaped by power dynamics and human ambition, the good person must awaken to the realities around them, or risk becoming a casualty of their own virtue. The challenge lies in reconciling the desire to do good with the necessity of navigating a world that often rewards the opposite. The predicament of the good person is often compounded by the societal expectation that goodness equates to passivity. There is a prevailing belief that virtue means submission to external forces, that kindness requires one to absorb injustice silently, and that morality demands self-sacrifice without resistance. This misconception not only distorts the essence of goodness, but also renders the individual powerless within a world governed by conflict and competition. In reality, true goodness is not weakness, it is an active, deliberate stance that demands strength, vigilance, and sometimes a ruthless defense against forces that seek to exploit it. The world is replete with examples where those labeled as good are expected to suffer quietly in the face of wrongdoing. Their goodness is commodified, turned into a resource for others to extract benefits without reciprocation. The gentle are often tasked with bearing the burdens of society's ills, absorbing hatred, injustice, and cruelty, as if their virtue obliges them to do so. Yet, this expectation is a subtle form of coercion designed to perpetuate inequality and maintain control. By demanding that the good endure quietly, society ensures that power remains concentrated in the hands of the unprincipled, while the virtuous become silent victims of their own values. This dynamic reveals a harsh truth: goodness alone does not protect from harm, often it invites it. The good person's unwillingness to retaliate or to seek retribution can be interpreted as vulnerability. The absence of resistance is mistaken for weakness, making the good an easy target for exploitation. This exploitation is not limited to overt acts of cruelty, but extends to more insidious forms such as manipulation, deceit, and emotional coercion. The good person's trust and openness, qualities that should foster genuine human connection, instead become weapons wielded against them by those who prioritize self-interest over compassion. Moreover, the societal glorification of goodness as a passive virtue discourages the development of necessary skills for survival in a harsh world. The good are taught to forgive indiscriminately, to overlook offenses, and to prioritize harmony over justice. While these are noble ideals in theory, their application without discernment can erode the very foundations of individual dignity and security. Forgiveness without accountability enables the perpetuation of harmful behavior, while the avoidance of conflict often means surrendering ground to those who lack scruples. The good person who fails to assert boundaries or to defend their interests risks losing not only respect, but also the ability to influence outcomes in their favor. The dilemma extends to the internal struggle faced by the good person when confronted with moral compromise. The world rarely offers clear choices between right and wrong. Instead, it presents a complex web of gray areas where survival demands difficult decisions. The good person, bound by rigid ethical codes, may find themselves paralyzed or alienated in such scenarios. The fear of betraying their values can lead to inaction or misguided choices that ultimately harm their cause. This internal conflict is a source of profound frustration and can breed cynicism or despair when the consequences of idealism clash with reality. Yet, the tragedy is not only external but deeply psychological. The good person's self-identity is entwined with their moral compass, making any challenge to their goodness a threat to their very being. When society punishes virtue by rewarding duplicity and punishing integrity, the good person experiences a crisis of faith. not just in the world but in themselves. They question whether their efforts to uphold goodness have meaning, or if they are destined to be defeated by forces beyond their control. This crisis can lead to withdrawal, bitterness, or a retreat into isolation, further diminishing their capacity to effect change. In essence, the world's demand for goodness is often a demand for silence and submission, rather than for strength and justice. This paradox creates a space where goodness is devalued, misunderstood, and undermined. The good person's challenge is to redefine goodness, not as passive acceptance, but as an active, courageous engagement with the world's complexities. To do so requires recognizing that goodness must be fortified by resilience, strategic thinking, and an unyielding commitment to justice, even when it demands confrontation. Therefore, the danger of being a good person lies not in the goodness itself, but in the failure to adapt it to the realities of a flawed and often hostile world. Goodness without strength is a fragile shield easily shattered. To survive and to make a meaningful impact, the good must learn to wield their virtue as a force, not a weakness, balancing compassion with discernment and kindness with firmness. Only then can they navigate the perilous terrain of power and remain true to their principles without falling prey to the very dangers they seek to overcome. In the intricate dance of power and morality, the good person is frequently caught in a precarious position, forced to confront the stark reality that the world often rewards cunning and ruthlessness over kindness and honesty. While goodness is universally praised in theory, in practice, it is often sidelined, exploited, or outright crushed by those who view the world through a lens of self-interest and dominance. The world does not operate on idealistic principles. It moves according to the forces of power, influence, and control, where the strong dictate terms and the weak must adapt or perish. This cruel environment presents a grave challenge for the good person who seeks to live by moral conviction while navigating a landscape shaped by harsh pragmatism. Goodness, as a quality, requires more than simply adhering to ethical standards or showing compassion. It demands a profound understanding of the environment in which one acts, a recognition that virtue alone does not guarantee protection or success. The good person must cultivate awareness and discernment, for failing to do so risks making them prey to manipulation and betrayal. This necessitates a balance between maintaining one's moral compass and embracing a realistic appraisal of human nature and social dynamics. Without this balance, goodness becomes a naive ideal, disconnected from the practical demands of survival and influence. The danger emerges most clearly in the realm of interpersonal relationships and societal interactions. The good person often finds themselves at the mercy of those who lack scruples, individuals who are willing to lie, cheat, and use others to achieve their ends. These unscrupulous actors recognize that the good person's reluctance to engage in similar tactics creates an advantage they can exploit. The good person's trust, empathy, and inclination toward forgiveness, qualities that should nurture healthy relationships, become vulnerabilities in a world where power games are played relentlessly and without mercy. This exploitation erodes trust and leaves the good person disillusioned and vulnerable. Furthermore, societal structures frequently reinforce this imbalance by rewarding aggression and punishing restraint. Ambition and assertiveness are prized, while humility and kindness are often misunderstood as passivity or weakness. In political, corporate, or social arenas, those who are willing to bend rules, manipulate narratives, and outmaneuver opponents tend to rise to positions of power. Meanwhile, those who cling rigidly to principles may be marginalized, silenced, or dismissed as ineffective. This dynamic perpetuates a cycle where goodness is undervalued, and the moral high ground becomes a lonely, precarious perch. Another critical aspect of this danger lies in the psychological toll exacted on the good person. Living in a world that rewards duplicity and punishes integrity creates profound internal conflict. the good person must wrestle with feelings of helplessness, frustration, and isolation when their values seem to have little practical effect. They may question the efficacy of their principles and struggle to reconcile their ideals with the harsh realities they face. This internal struggle can weaken resolve, leading to cynicism, apathy, or even the temptation to abandon goodness altogether in favor of expediency. However, the true peril is not in the existence of evil or hardship, but in the erosion of the good person's ability to act effectively within this reality. When goodness is reduced to mere sentimentality, it loses its power to shape outcomes or inspire change. The good person's challenge is to transcend this reduction by embracing a form of virtue that is both principled and pragmatic. This means understanding when to stand firm and when to adapt, when to trust and when to be cautious, and when to show mercy and when to enforce boundaries. It requires cultivating strength, resilience, and strategic thinking alongside compassion and integrity. This adaptation does not mean abandoning moral values, but rather recognizing that the application of goodness must be nuanced and situational. The good person must learn to navigate the complexities of power with an acute awareness of the forces at play. They must become adept at reading intentions, anticipating threats, and defending their interests without compromising their core principles. This balance is delicate and demands constant vigilance, self-reflection, and courage. In the final analysis, the danger of being a good person lies in the misconception that goodness alone is sufficient armor against the world's harshness. Without the complementary qualities of strength and pragmatism, goodness is exposed to exploitation and defeat. The good person must therefore evolve beyond simplistic ideals and embrace a form of virtue that is both resilient and effective. A virtue that can endure and prevail in a world often indifferent or hostile to moral integrity. Only by doing so can they protect themselves and contribute meaningfully to the transformation of the societies they inhabit. The ultimate peril faced by the good person is not merely external but deeply internal. The slow erosion of spirit and identity under relentless pressure from a world that neither understands nor values true goodness. This erosion occurs when the good person, confronted with unyielding hostility, betrayal, and cynicism, begins to question the very foundation of their beliefs and the meaning of their existence. When the values of kindness, honesty, and integrity are repeatedly met with disdain or exploitation, the good person is forced into a crucible of doubt and despair. This internal struggle threatens to consume their will, reducing their once unshakable conviction into a fragile remnant of hope. In societies dominated by power struggles and self-interest, the good person often finds themselves isolated and misunderstood. Their motives, rooted in compassion and justice, are misread as weakness or naivety. This misunderstanding further alienates them from the circles of influence where decisions are made, and where survival often depends on one's ability to play the game of deception and manipulation. The good person's exclusion from these spheres can lead to a sense of futility, a belief that their efforts to do right are insignificant in the face of overwhelming odds. This sense of futility can breed resentment and bitterness, emotions that are antithetical to genuine goodness but which can seep in as defense mechanisms. The danger also lies in the insidious nature of compromise. Over time, the good person may find themselves forced to make concessions that chip away at their principles. These compromises are often justified as necessary evils, temporary measures to survive, or to achieve a greater good. However, such concessions carry the risk of becoming habitual, gradually transforming the good person into something they once opposed. The slippery slope of moral compromise can lead to the loss of authenticity, where the individual's identity is no longer aligned with their core values, but shaped by the demands of expediency and survival. This transformation is one of the most profound dangers because it signifies not only a personal loss, but a broader societal failure to protect and nurture virtue. Moreover, the external world contributes to this danger through systems and institutions that reward conformity and discourage dissent. The good person, who often questions injustice and stands against wrongdoing, finds themselves at odds with structures designed to maintain the status quo. These structures wield power not only through force but through cultural narratives that delegitimize moral courage as impractical or idealistic. The good person's voice, advocating for change and fairness, is drowned out by the cacophony of self-interest and manipulation that dominates public discourse. This suppression reinforces the isolation of the good person and diminishes their influence, creating a feedback loop that perpetuates cynicism and apathy in society at large. Yet, the most dangerous consequence of being a good person in such a world is the risk of invisibility. When goodness is undervalued or dismissed, the good person's actions go unnoticed, their sacrifices unacknowledged. This invisibility undermines the sense of purpose and achievement that sustains moral action. Without recognition or reinforcement, the good person may lose motivation, leading to withdrawal or disengagement from public life. This retreat leaves a void in society, one that is quickly filled by those who operate without regard for ethics or compassion. The absence of good actors exacerbates social decay, making the world more hostile and less just. Despite these profound dangers, the good person holds a unique and indispensable role. Their steadfast commitment to principle, even in the face of adversity, serves as a beacon of hope and a reminder of what society aspires to be. Their presence challenges the cynicism and corruption that threaten to define the world, inspiring others to reflect on their values and choices. The good person's struggle is not a futile one, but a vital part of the ongoing battle between darkness and light within human nature and society. It is through their resilience and moral clarity that the possibility of a better future endures. To navigate these perils, the good person must cultivate inner strength and resilience. They must learn to withstand external pressures without succumbing to despair or bitterness. This requires a profound sense of self-awareness and an unwavering belief in the worthiness of their cause. They must also develop strategic wisdom, understanding when to assert themselves and when to conserve their energy, how to protect their integrity while engaging effectively with the world around them. This balance between moral purity and pragmatic action is essential for sustaining goodness in a world often hostile to it. Ultimately, the danger of being a good person is a challenge to the very essence of humanity's moral fabric. It calls for courage, perseverance, and a deep understanding of the complexities of human nature and society. The good person's journey is fraught with trials, but it is also the crucible in which true virtue is forged and preserved, providing a foundation for justice, compassion, and hope in an uncertain world. And so we arrive at the heart of the matter. To be a good person in a decaying world is not an act of comfort, but one of radical resistance. It is not rewarded, not celebrated, and more often than not, punished with silence, exclusion, or betrayal. But the erosion of goodness is not only a moral crisis, it is a political one, a cultural one, and above all, a human one. When society loses sight of virtue, when truth becomes relative and power the only currency, the good man becomes the enemy. Not because he threatens the world with force, but because he reminds it of what it chose to forget: conscience, decency, and the dignity of truth. This is the real danger, the slow normalization of corruption, the transformation of cruelty into policy, and the elevation of indifference as wisdom. In such a world, goodness is not just difficult, it is dangerous, but it is also necessary. Because without those few who refuse to compromise, who cling to truth even when truth brings pain, who speak when silence is safer, without them, the entire structure collapses. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need applause. But you do need to remain awake. For in a time where being good is a threat, the good must become brave.